I imagine, I know it's not a biopic of Gerhard Richter, but you had to have a conveyance. You needed an artist to build the story around and tell it. So of all the artists you could have chosen, why Richter?
Um, you know, it was really, I mean, it started with it. Hadn't known Richter all that well, and I knew there was this one very beautiful painting that he'd done, which was originally released as Mother and Child, and it shows a beautiful young woman holding a little baby, and then later Richter explained that this was not actually his mother and his child, it was, and her child. It was him as a little child, being held by his mother's youngest sister, who shortly after that photograph had developed schizophrenia and had been murdered by the Nazis in their eugenics program. And I always found that, it's a very moving and a very moving story that he would build this memorial to his aunt in this painting so many years later, and it also gave a face to these victims. It's and I thought that so that had always interested me. And then a journalist who, a very famous journalist in Germany, he did an interview with me, or I don't even remember what it was about, because I soon noticed I was more interested in interviewing him. He was a really interesting character. And so I said, what else are you working on? Very often journalists have another life beyond their journalism. They have a kind of secret Batman activity of and writing books, or I don't know, plays or something. And this man said, well, actually, I just took a year off from the paper to write a biography of Gerhard Richter. And I said, well, that's interesting. Why would you do that? So much has been written on him. And he said, I did a background piece on Richter and found out that the father of the woman that Richter ended up marrying was actually a high-ranking SS doctor and a central part of the eugenics program, himself responsible for 900 of the forced sterilizations, and someone who got free and actually died in, I think, 1988 at age, I think, 94 or something. It's really, and never got caught. And then, but if you look at Gerhard Richter's work, it almost seems like, although no one could have known this because he really managed to keep it secret, it's all there. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. This is a really interesting starting point for an exploration of creativity and artistic work, and for exactly what you described, kind of how we can use all the things that happen to us in life to create something great and overcome it. I think with every challenge that we have in life, or with every terrible thing that happens to us, we can always decide to, lie down and die, or we can decide to somehow try and overcome it. One of my great teachers in overcoming the things is here today, Arnold. So that's, it is really, I think that's why art is something so wonderful to us. It is because it is living proof and testament that we can overcome things. Mm-hmm. I really think that is what gives us comfort in art. Why do we like looking at a picture of the bombers throwing the bombs over Dresden? It's because we know this artist experienced it and somehow overcame his trauma by putting it into art. And I think it's like that. Why do we enjoy listening to a song on the radio about lost love and all that? It's because we know that somehow the fact that this very song was written is testament to the fact that it's possible to get through it. Right. And that is that's something that I wanted to capture in this film.
When you have a director and a director of photography, I feel like there's always this magical alchemy that happens that, as a civilian, is magical and is a little mysterious. You're the author of the story, but you're the visual author of the story. And it's like, if you don't have the right partner, you might as well just throw those pages out the window.
That's completely true. That's completely true, and I've never experienced that more. Just before we pass it on to Caleb, I need to say that Caleb has been really the director of photography who brought me to understand photography as art, because it was one of my very first times at the movie theaters. We were living in New York at the time, and when I was 7 years old, he brought me to the theater to see. It was an open-air theater in New York to see The Black Stallion, and this was Caleb's first feature as a photographer. And I mean, it's basically, the film is all photography. There's hardly any dialogue because it's a boy and a horse, and so it is truly a film told in images. And I remember thinking, understanding that images can be art at that young age. And since then, there are very few photographers for whom I will actually just, no matter what the movie is, I'll go and see it.
Right.
And it was like that with Caleb. So I knew right when I had the idea for this, I knew there were two people that I absolutely had to have on board. One was the actor who plays Siban, the evil doctor, Sebastian Koch. He was, you know him, of course,
yes.
and we had that wonderful
work.
meeting all those years ago. And
brilliant.
he and I knew that I needed his charm in a way for this part, because otherwise this person is so evil and so terrible that I'd be running out of the theater. And the other person I knew I needed was Caleb Deschanel, and I knew that he passes on everything. I know that from a lot of directors. And so I called him and said, Caleb, can we meet for a coffee? I just need to tell you about this story, and I somehow feel like I can't go into writing it if you could, if you couldn't say that at least you'd be interested in considering it.
I better take over here. So Florian calls me and he says, I have this idea for a movie and I really want to tell you about it. And so we meet at Farm Shop in Santa Monica, and at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we sat there and he's telling me the story, and I'm on the edge of my seat the whole time, which is the story you see here on the screen. And we didn't leave till 1 o'clock.
That's amazing.
We were there drinking coffee, and I had I think a bowl of oatmeal or something, and the whole rest of the time I'm just listening to him telling this incredible story that is based on information that he got from Richter, and I assume some of what he made up. And anyway, it took 4 hours, so the film is actually an hour shorter than the story that he
that was
told
the
me,
first
so.
director's cut.
But I have to say, when I saw the movie, there are a couple of scenes missing, and even though it's so long, there's scenes that I really would have loved to have had left in the movie. I mean, I wish that we could have the actors here, because the actors were so incredible. I mean, to me, one of the keys to the movie was, obviously all these incredibly dramatic situations that he goes through. And then, if you don't have him have this epiphany and discover how to paint, and you look at that scene, and it's where he's finally discovering who he is, and it's a really complex scene, and it really terrified me before we did it. Because
I did want to ask you about that, because that was all on you.
Well, but
projectors
you say that, but I think if you
around.
went back and you looked at the movie and you looked at Tom Schilling, who plays Kurt, you see how much incredible silent acting is in him, where he makes this discovery, and you read it in his eyes, and you read it in his
body
behavior,
language.
and he really was a good painter by the time we did those
Yeah.
scenes, and he really knew what he was doing, because he worked with some really great painters who were, as a matter of fact, one of the painters that we worked with was actually Richter's assistant. So, I mean, the other thing is sort of the serendipity, because it was always written that the wind would blow and the lights, would turn off, and then you would see the image on the screen. But there's a moment when you introduce Kurt as an adult for the first time, Tom Schilling, and he's up in a tree. And we had to, we found this one tree out in the middle of nowhere in eastern Germany, right by the Polish-Czech border. And we knew that we needed a Technocrane, so we had a Technocrane out there. And then on that day, we had the most incredible wind. And it was almost, it was just perfect, because it's a moment where he sort of makes this revelation, and he comes and tells his parents, and his parents all think he's going nuts.
Yeah, they're very happy. Yeah,
And, because he has this epiphany, and it just fed in perfectly to the scene,
That's
at the end
amazing.
of the movie.
Please help me thank Caleb and Florian.